Welcome to the People Chronicles. I'm Jackie Hoffman. We welcome you today, and we welcome your stories. If you have a story that you'd like to share, as we very well know, each of us has a story, and if you're willing to share it, then we're willing to hear it. Tim Shapiro is with us today. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
I think you have many stories, and the first thing that we always do is ask our guest, what is it that you want our listeners and viewers to learn from your story?
Never give up hope in your dreams, because if it wasn't for me following my dreams and having a lot of support from friends and family, I wouldn't have gotten to the level that I feel I'm at.
So let's learn a little bit about you and the goals that you have reached. And one of them that I just learned, and we're going to have to backtrack, is the fact that Tim has a Grammy, but don't go there yet. Have you always lived in Berks County, Tim?
I was born in Reading. I moved up to the Harrisburg area when I was 1 or 2 years old. Graduated from high school up in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Moved back to Reading in the early 90s to take care of a relative that was dying, and fell in love in Reading and decided to stay down here and pursue my wife.
To pursue your wife. That's a nice way to say it. And you have a lovely family.
I have a wife, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I have a soon-to-be 4-year-old son.
All right. Now tell us what you do for a living.
I'm a touring audio engineer, which sounds really good on your tax forms, and my parents are impressed with the title. For lack of a better word, I'm a sound guy. I turn the knobs and make things loud at concerts.
And I don't think that people really take the time to think about what it is that they're hearing. It's just what they're seeing up on stage. They pay for that ticket, and then they realize a little bit into the concert how loud it is, whose guitar is making the best sounds, where the, drums are coming from. And to me, when I go to a concert, the first thing that I'm so interested and starstruck with is the person that's on stage. So you kind of are the invisible hero when you go to a concert.
Correct. I'm considered the hidden member of the band. My joke is if the show sounds good and you walk out singing it, I did a good job. If the show sounds really bad, blame the band, they played poorly. But 9 times out of 10, it's the acoustics of the room or someone just making some bad mistakes playing. But yeah, I'm the unheard band member.
And how did you get involved in doing what you do? Is this like something fresh out of high school, kind of on-the-job training? Because from this point, from when you're in high school, I mean, you have traveled all over the place, which we're going to get to.
I've traveled 27 countries according to my passport, and we actually just went through and spent a couple of months figuring it out. But back in high school, I was in what's called stage crew, having to set up all the plays and all the announcements and everything that went on. And in my freshman year, because I was the freshman, the new guy on the crew, I had to set up for homecoming, and we had a band come in. And I had to be there all day to help the band load in and set their equipment up. And it was a band called Press Club from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They, for some reason, liked me, and I really took to it because I always had a love of music. And they took me under their wing, and I started going on the road with them because they were playing all up and down the East Coast. So I would go to school until 3 o'clock, and then sometimes I'd hop in my car and drive to a bar in Lancaster, and kind of underage, would work in bars and would travel all up and down, being that young kid who set everything up and made sure the band was ready.
So how do people get in contact with you? How do they find out who you are? Is it just, a matter of knowing this band and their manager and somebody knows somebody? How does it work?
I've been very lucky with word of mouth that I work with one artist who works with another artist, and they bring me on, then their manager gets to know me. A lot of the artists I work with, I've been with Kevin Bacon, the actor, has a band called the Bacon Brothers. I was with him for over 10 years. And his manager also managed the Spin Doctors. So when they got together in 2002 and they needed a sound man, he made sure to put me on that crew. And then they also managed Joan Osborne. So one manager who might manage 4 or 5 different acts can keep you going for all the year. And sometimes you overlap and you get done with one show, have to hop on the plane so you can be on the next show the next day with another act. But I've been very lucky, and I got a good word of mouth with one manager. And then your name gets out there in a circle of being one of the engineers that play certain levels. Like, there's some sound people that are wonderful. There's some local sound people that you'll never hear of that do local bands and local bars and are the top of the field. These are guys that are probably revolutionizing the industry, but you just don't know them because they don't want to go to the next level. They're really happy doing what they're doing. I get in the level of engineers that play arenas and stadiums, and I've been very lucky that managers just know how to find me. They contact other management companies. I do interviews such as this, and somebody will find me and look me up on Facebook, and that's how I got my last job. Is they saw me on Facebook and saw that I happened to say I'm available for work right now, and a day after putting that post up, I was hired to go to Australia.
That's a real mover and shaker right there. You're always kind of sitting on the edge of your seat, and you really don't know what's coming up. Like, do you know the very next thing that you have? What is the next thing in your schedule that you have?
Next thing, I leave this Friday to go on a cruise.
So we caught you just in time. You're going on to do sound on a cruise?
To do sound on what's called the Rock Boat. It's, I believe, 25 bands, including Collective Soul, Sister Hazel, and a few other great acts, are doing one of these specialty cruises that you're going to be on the cruise for 3 days. You can hear, all the bands play at least twice during the cruise, and the artist that I'm on tour with right now is one of the artists.
But it sounds like it's fun. And that's what people say to me. Your job is so much fun, but you know what? It has its downside too. What is it? What are the downsides?
Downsides are you don't realize how much it takes to put on a concert. When you buy a ticket and you show up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock for an 8 o'clock show, you don't realize that I may have been there since 8 o'clock that morning, sometimes earlier, setting the gear up. We don't get done loading out till sometimes 2 or 3 hours or longer after the show ends. Carrie Underwood's a great example when she played Reading. I believe it was 5 hours after the show ended, we were still loading trucks outside in the winter. So there are long hours involved, sleepless nights, and the toughest part for me is it was much easier for me to tour when I was single. And when I met my wife, I have the most understanding wife. I met her. I said, I'm going to marry you someday. We dated for 3 days, moved her into my house, and I left for 6 months on tour. And at the end of the tour, I asked her to marry me. I flew her out to California to the Tonight Show and asked her to marry me on the Tonight Show. So we
Yeah. That's story
another
in itself.
But she's very understanding and realizes that was my dreams, and she wants to live out her dreams sometimes. But this is how we pay the bills. It's just as if I would work at Walmart or any other real job. This is how I pay my bills. It got slightly tougher when I had my daughter. I was out on tour doing some press shows, meaning one song here, one song there, to announce a new album with Jennifer Lopez. And we ended in New York City at a recording studio called Sony Music Studios, which was the world's largest recording studio at one point. Unfortunately, now it's gone under. My wife called me during sound check and said, hi, honey, I just want to let you know I'm pregnant. And I said, I can't talk right now. Jennifer's really having some problems. I got to see to her. I'll call you back in half an hour. And I hung up on her to realize that she told me that I was going to be a father.
For the first time.
Yeah, kind of took me a few minutes for that to hit me. And I called her back, and she kind of chastised me for not answering. But it's much more difficult now leaving home, because now it's not just, honey, I can talk to you on the phone, or I can fly you out when I have a day off here and there. Now I have 2 children that want to see daddy at night and want daddy to put them to bed. So thankfully Skype is around and FaceTime is around, which wasn't around in the earlier years. But it makes it tough having to deal with musicians sometimes that aren't the nicest of people. Sometimes they have their own agendas, and they put that face on where they're entertaining everybody, but when they're working with you, they're a little bit more focused or demanding. It makes it tough to know that you're putting up with that grief when your heart's really at home putting somebody to bed.
Right, and there are a lot of challenges, as you said, when you're talking about raising a family and being away from home and having an understanding wife. So she certainly knew what she was getting into before all this started.
She knew what she was getting into. We actually talked, this is how old we go back, AOL chat rooms. If anyone even remembers America Online chat rooms, there used to be one called Cafe Reading. And I was talking to this woman and told her what I did, and she didn't believe me. And I said, oh, I work for Kevin Bacon and I work for this and that. And she didn't believe me, and she asked around, and they said, yeah, that's his story. We don't know if it's true, but it's a story. We met. Like I said, I fell in love with her. Ended up that her backyard, conveniently enough, her backyard and my backyard almost touched. We were about 50 feet apart and didn't know it. So it was just pure coincidence that everything came together. I said, let's go on a date. We went on a date. I fell in love. And then again, I had to go back out on tour. So I made sure to bring her out, and I flew her. She never left Pennsylvania at this point except to go to the beach. She went, I think, to Ocean City, Maryland and such, but she never really traveled the country. And I put her on a plane for the first time, and I had her picked up by limousine at LAX and brought to the Tonight Show. And Tonight Show was really great. They're very accommodating to anybody who's on the show. And the artist I was touring with at the time was the musical guest, and which was, I'll name drop. It was the Goo Goo Dolls. Very proud of that. And before the show started, Jay comes out, and they have a comedian who does some games, and they happen to pick my wife out of the crowd to play some games, and they happen to pick me out of the crowd next to the stage, all set up. And they asked her name, asked my name. They said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well," and I pull out of my pocket a ring that I've been carrying around for a few weeks. And I asked my wife to marry me on The Tonight Show during the pre-show.
Perfect timing. Yes, indeed. And earlier we talked about you coming home from Australia, of all places. And we're going to get back to the Grammy Award that you have. And we're going to hear about some more name dropping, which is very interesting. And I also want to find out from you, who picks up the tab when you do all this traveling? And does your wife ever say, "Can I just come along just once in a while?" So we're going to come right back to that on the People Chronicles with Tim Shapiro. I'm Jackie Hoffman.